Hi, I'm Lori Moroco, and I'm here to give my presentation on the case study article that we read on Agile and UX designers. The case study talked about how a Danish software company was able to successfully integrate UX designers and software developers into an Agile environment. And normally these two ideas would clash because Agile tends to move fast and code fast, and UX tends to be slower, do a lot more research, testing, design, etc. So the question is how can they coexist without getting into each other's way? And there are three things that surprised me about this article. The first one is how upfront design actually makes them more agile. So I always thought that agile meant don't plan too much upfront. But in this case, the UX users and the system architect actually spent real time together before starting the coding. And they talked about things like user flows and understanding the problem, which ultimately prevented reworking the problem later. And this meant that changes were cheaper, they could get done quicker. It wasn't so chaotic having to go back and rework things. So that really flipped my understanding of Agile. The second thing that surprised me was that UX and developers were agile, but in completely different ways. And this was a pretty big thing for me to take away because developers use agility for simplicity and reducing risks, and UX used agility for quality and learning from users. And they weren't doing the same work, they were actually doing complementary work. And the article called this mutual adjustment. So agile didn't mean that everybody works the same way. It meant that everybody continuously adjusts to each other's style and work. And then the third thing that surprised me is that they started to drift apart and then everything actually got worse. So, for instance, the customers stopped paying for upfront design, and UX and developers started working more separately, and they lost a lot of things that they shared prior to that, like languages and tools and even thinking. And so ultimately, they came back together and said, we need to get back to how it was before. It was working much better then. So it surprised me because agile interpretation is pretty fragile. If you don't sort of protect it, people will start to slide into their own silos. And the company I work for is Colorado Mountain College, and I don't really see it being used at CMC, maybe in IT, but I'm not completely sure. But I do know that it could be very, very helpful in our organization. So right now, what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of handoffs, a lot of people working in their silos. There's a lot of reworking things because there was not clarity up front. People solve problems later instead of earlier. And so we're always backtracking to fix things. And so that's kind of what this company did in the article with upfront design. So if we used it in higher ed, I could see it being used maybe for curriculum development. So before launching a new course, we would get the faculty together, the instructional design team, IT, some administration. I'm an assistant dean, so we would get together. We would sit down as a team and sort of map out the whole experience for the students, not just the course, but actually the flow of how it would go and how it would ultimately impact students. It would really prevent a lot of confusion later and after the fact. And so again, I think working in parallel, we would have this cross-department collaboration right from the beginning. Um, Instead of, okay, faculty have an idea, they want to design a course, they pass it off to student affairs, they react, and then they put in what they think, and then ultimately the student struggles because we didn't ask what the student actually wanted. We didn't think about that experience. Instead, we'd have ongoing check-ins. We would have smaller iterations of the plan, and would have a lot of feedback loops. Again, this is kind of the idea of Agile, from what I understand. We would have mutual adjustment, which would actually be a shared learning. So right now, different departments are using a lot of different models. Agile would force us to really share things like artifacts, studies, research. We would share planning, and we would share ownership of if it worked or if it didn't work. Is Agile successful where it's used in IT? I would say yes. Problems can be very complex, change is constant. Higher ed is equally complex. We don't just treat it like a system that needs these iterations. The article actually convinced me that Agile is not just for software, which I'm excited to learn. It's really for any environment where people kind of work in their silos. They stay in their little departments and their cubicles, and they don't peek over the walls. Change does happen. Rework is very common, and communication is actually the real issue, which would work perfectly for higher ed. So in closing, what surprised me most is that Agile really isn't about speed and just software. It's really about communication and preventing problems early. And thank you from somebody that has been teaching communication for the past 25 years, have a PhD in communication. It's incredible to me to hear that this could actually solve those problems. So thank you.